Life rarely goes as planned.
Very true.
So yesterday, my new book came out, Burn the Math. Really excited about it. I think it's my best book. But on the back cover, that's what it says. That's literally the first words that I put.
The tagline.
Life rarely goes as planned. And isn't that the truth?
Yeah, I mean, you can almost update that to never.
Well, it's funny. When I wrote Still Standing After All the Tears, I have this one person in mind. And I literally said that I know exactly one person whose life is going, so it seemed, as planned. I hadn't seen her in a few years. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
You know, who knows if maybe life blew up on her since.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I know people whose lives are going great. But every single person has had something blow up on them. Whether it was just a job, you know, something that doesn't, you know, it's not life-threatening.
Yeah. No, I mean, I immediately can think of a really good example. My cousin Robbie. He's had, he's been really fortunate to have like a lot of good support stuff, so he could go play college basketball, and he's been pretty successful everywhere that he's gone, and he would tell you he's had a real fortunate life for the most part, but he's even had some weird stuff. Like, I don't know if you remember, he was going out to go to Lake Chelan.
Yes.
And he's hitching the boat, and he trips, falls, and lands his calf on the little hitch flap, split his calf in half.
It was so bad.
He was in the hospital for like 8 hours, and the doctor comes over and goes, "Oh, you need like 120 staples." I mean, I'm exaggerating the numbers, but
yeah,
stuff like that even. And now he's got this atrophied split ankle, and he's 6'10", built like me.
Yeah.
And he's trying to walk around on one leg with this mangled calf when he was supposed to be out on a beach party somewhere.
He's a good example because his life, you know, he didn't really map out. It's sort of like it was mapped out for him because he is stepping into a family business that is very successful, and he's very fortunate. He'd be the first one to tell you that. And so I would say overall, if he were here, he'd probably say my life is great.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody still had things. So when they had Emma, their second child, he almost lost Erica.
I was going to say, it almost killed her. Yeah.
Yeah. And so everybody's had something that, and in those moments where you don't know what's up ahead in the road is the point.
Using him again, a quick example. He was.
Should we just call him up and see if he can come here?
That'd be great. I'd love for him to come here. He was a really good Division II basketball player. I think he could have probably played D1. Honestly, I watched him play against UW and beat the shit out of their center repeatedly. Mike Jensen, if you're out there. But Robbie gets a bunch of pro offers overseas in Europe, and he takes what he thinks is the best offer from a Romanian team. They tell him, you have your own apartment, you'll have a car, we may have a roommate for you in the apartment, but it'll be one of the other centers, and everyone speaks English, the whole thing. He gets there, no car. He has to take city buses everywhere, and it's a shit little town. No one speaks English, including the coach.
Oh, no.
And his apartment was an old dorm room at a defunct college that they put out and put a twin bed for a 6'10". He was there for about 2 weeks, and he was like, "Guess I don't play professional basketball anymore." So, I mean, I would say, like you said, there was some mapping out for him, but then he had his own plans, and then those plans fell through, and then he fell back into the...
Right.
So even for him, there was, like, he's... And by no means am I trying to sit here and say Robbie's had this perfect life. I'm saying he's been fortunate, and he would tell you that himself.
Yeah.
But
I'll take his life.
He had his own variants and things that he wanted to do. And he constantly had things jump in front of him and move him around.
Yeah.
And that's just one story of one normal person from Seattle.
Yeah. And I was kind of like, I got into goal setting, and I still set goals. You know, I know you're in sales, you have to set goals. But as far as my life goals, Sean, they're more like flexible targets, you know, where it's kind of, or more short term too, because, and it's not because I'm giving up on life or because I'm being pessimistic. It's more just that I know, having experienced, obviously, Jamie getting into addiction was 180 degrees from anything I ever could have imagined my life would be or her life would be. Beyond, I mean, talk about, you know, life burning up your map. Talk about, you know, your just whole life just not being anything like you think it can be, and not being able to make anything happen. And then, she shot that first time, and then her murder. But there's been other things that have hit me upside the head too. Like, when the guy we thought was a really good friend stole our savings. And the point is that life happens. And okay, to everyone.
Well, and he wasn't even a good friend. He was like family.
Yeah. Yeah. I called her brother. But so the reason that I added people to my book this time. So this is the first time that I've written a book where I included stories. I'm calling them warriors of 12 different people. You, of course, being one, and Rich, of course, being one. But it's I'm really kind of happy about how I did it because I sprinkled them throughout. I didn't go like, oh, here's a chapter on so-and-so, and here, let's tell their life story.
Yeah.
It's more like they're really strategically placed.
You couldn't possibly tell 12 life stories in a single book anyways. So.
No, but even if I just told their little thing, and I just feel like the way it got sprinkled throughout, it's really powerful because the concepts and the things that I'm trying to say are supported by their stories and vice versa. So, like, for instance, it starts out where I'm saying, life goes, you're just going along. Like, you're just going along, living your life. And then the call comes in, aggressive breast cancer. So this is April in the book, April Iser, and she's 10 years from that.
Yeah,
10 years past that. I mean, how cool is that? But that's when, life blows up in your face with a phone call.
Yeah. And that's a scary one too, right? Like that could be the end of your life.
Yeah, and it's aggressive breast cancer. Like, whoa. But I feel like...
Yeah, the word aggressive, I don't think tends to be all that positive in connotation for the most part.
With health? Yeah, no.
With most things.
Yeah, with most things. You're right.
Things being considered aggressive, maybe growth in the stock market, but other than that, I can't think.
You're right. They're rarely in the positive.
Yeah.
That is true. But what I love about April's story, and this is why these aren't just stories of people that have had these terrible things happen, and boo-hoo, by the end of the book, you're like depressed. It's really the opposite because I'm so inspired by every single one of these people in different ways. They're all warriors in different ways and courageous. So for her, this is one of the really cool things that I loved when I interviewed her for this book. She said she went down the inevitable rabbit hole of self-pity.
Of course.
Who wouldn't? And then it didn't take her long, though. You know what she said? Why do I have to have breast cancer? Why do I have to have breast cancer? Then she said, who are you? Who do you think you are that someone else should get it and not you?
Yeah. But
wow.
I'm above this kind of a...
Right, but isn't that inspiring to think that really quickly she did that? She thought, who do you think you are?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like how I felt when I was like with Jamie's addiction. I said, why me? Only about 1,000 times. And then finally I was in the mirror one day. I was literally doing something in the mirror and I looked at myself and I said, why not you? Why don't you be the one to go do something with all this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think everyone has that. Like we talked about this last time I was on when all this stuff started happening with my joints and I'm in the hospital. I literally sat in a wheelchair, had just stubbed my ankle that was that big on the door jamb trying to go take a pee. And I literally looked up at God with tears in my eyes and said, like, I don't deserve this. Why me?
Yeah.
But fast forward a couple weeks later, now I'm sitting here thinking, realistically, a person like myself who's lifted weights my whole life, who has strength and everything, is probably more equipped to handle coming back from something like this than the average person. Right. So, in all reality, probably better me than someone else. And it took me a minute to get to that.
Of course.
Because at first I was like...
Yeah, no, we all get mad at God. We all wonder why me. But I feel like your coming back from a physical standpoint is nothing compared to, you and I were talking about this before, to you having that moment where you told me, wow, and I actually put this in the book. You don't even know what's in the book about you, but I said, you sent me this message and you basically said that you were looking at this in a positive way and you were still in bad shape. This was a few weeks ago. And you said that you were looking at life in a different way. You were like, I'm going to focus on my health, which we did talk about a lot in the last time you were on. But also you said, I'm not going to take for granted
the little things,
the abilities that you have. And so I think that's what what I love think about all the stories that have inspired you in life. Sure, there's stories about maybe weightlifting or things that you're interested in, and those stories are interesting and inspiring and motivating. But the people that move you most, Sean, are always the ones who've gotten up off the mat.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're always the one who fought through hardship, through adversity.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that make us think, dang, maybe I could do it. So I feel like if someone hears that story that you just said, or the April story we mentioned, they don't have to have breast cancer to be inspired by somebody having that kind of attitude.
Yeah. An example that I think of actually is Kobe Bryant. It effectively ended his career, but he drives to the basket, he gets fouled, and he comes up limping. Turns out he had clean snapped his Achilles, and he's like,
Ooh.
I think he was almost 40 at the time, which is not old, but in professional sports, it's ancient, right? And a season-ending injury like that ended up being career. But he walked back out on the court because there was 2 free throws to be shot because he was fouled, with his Achilles tendon completely detached, career likely over. And he knew. He admitted later, I heard it snap. I knew. He walked out there and hit both his free throws and walked of his own volition back off the court. He chose to rise to that occasion, and that's the kind of thing, like you said, that's inspiring. If he would have been like, I'm hurt, I can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, that's a story everyone would forget.
Yeah, you're right.
But now it's constantly brought up in the sports world. I remember when Kobe snapped his Achilles and he went out there and shot his free throws. People like stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, it always is inspiring when people have courage, when people fight through pain, whatever. I mean, and that's why, another person I was thinking about that I wrote about, I don't know if you and I have talked about it on a podcast before, but I've had Sandy on the podcast, Jamie's friend that was in addiction.
Yep.
And what I didn't say in the book, and I may say when she's on the podcast again, but she actually contacted me shortly after Jamie's murder and said, I kind of know some things. And she also, at first when she contacted me, actually, I was just like, go live your life.
You gave her the Heisman the first time.
I did. I said, go get clean and go live your life, because I didn't want anything to do with anyone in that world. Okay, so people who are listening can't see me doing my air quotes.
Yeah.
But I didn't want, of course.
Understandably so. You associate all those stories, thoughts, feelings, behaviors with the worst parts of Jamie's life. So it's...
Well, and those kind of people, it scared me. That whole world scared me, Sean, to be perfectly honest. So I didn't want anything to do with these people. Just go away, go live your life, go get clean. That's how you can honor Jamie. Because anyone who contacted me was like, Jamie was the best person.
She did, for the record.
And for the record, she did. So when she contacted me again, and we connected, and obviously she's even part of this book now, I said, well, let me tell you what, Sandy. We didn't end up needing you because we had witnesses. She wasn't there, but she knew things.
Multiple people that told her what happened there.
And she was talked to right afterwards, blah, blah, blah.
Could have absolutely gone to court and been a third-party witness for sure.
But I didn't want to impact her being clean. I didn't want her recovery to be impacted by fear or these people coming after her, anything like that. But I told her after she and I reconnected, I said, but if I'd have needed you, I'd have thrown you under the bus. And she goes, I would have done it. But anyway, I think what's inspiring about her story for me, it's unfortunate that Jamie had to die for her to get clean. But she flat out said, I think one time we were talking to her, you and I actually, and she said, Jamie saved my life by dying. So let's put it this way. Jamie didn't save her life. Jamie's story saved her life.
On Tuesday, when we were all talking on the
Zoom?
Last Tuesday, we were all talking on the Zoom call. She said that again, and she said that Jamie's murder gave her immediate perspective. She said, we were the outsiders that weren't protected by these people. She moved from California. Jamie moved from Washington, from LA. They weren't part of the little IE clique. And she said, I realized I was next. So those are her exact words. So, yeah, gave Jamie's death, who was her best friend, gave her perspective.
Yeah.
I got to get out of here.
What I love about her courage is, because people are in recovery all day long and you might not consider them courageous. I think it's really courageous to take on a beast like that. Everyone that's in recovery, I think, fought hard.
Back away from her entire world.
Yeah.
Everyone she knew, everything, and become kind of the public enemy number one to these people, move out, and then change her entire life.
Yeah, and fight for her children.
And tell her husband, you got to do the same, or...
Right. So her husband was in prison. I didn't put any of this.
He's clean with her as well for a while now too.
The same amount of time, because she just said
2.5, 3 or 4 years or something.
No,
like that.
way more than that.
More than that.
Yeah, Jayslyn is almost Jamie's namesake. She named her daughter after Jamie. She'll be 7, I think, in October.
Oh wow, it's that long.
So I think it's been several years. But he was in prison. I mean, they're really both. I didn't put any of his story. I don't know him or anything, but I just think it's because she lost 2 children to the system, which she hopes one day to reconnect with. But she also lost 2 children to her mother was raising them. So losing them meaning she wasn't raising them.
It wasn't in their lives.
Yeah. And now I know that she does have a great relationship with the other 2, I believe. We'll see when she comes on the podcast. So she's reconnected with 2 of them. But I just feel like, Sean, how you had this thing happen with you and you were thinking, why God, why me? This is this thing that's happening right now that I don't want to have happen. Imagine if you had 4 children that were growing up without you. The guilt.
You're on drugs, your significant other's in prison. Yeah, there's quite a great deal of burden there.
Yeah, so the guilt and the feeling like giving up and maybe even not the feeling like you're a victim, but feeling the shame of it, thinking.
Well, more and more reason to keep doing drugs, because every waking moment you're feeling horrible about that.
So you take
drugs. That feeling fades away, and the courage to say, I have to live in this fire. I have to sit in this. Comedians call it sitting in the bomb when they're on stage bombing, and there's nowhere to go. You got an hour left of the show. You just have to sit there and keep telling your jokes that no one's laughing at.
Yeah.
She kind of had to do that metaphorically she just sit in that fire like, I have failed these people in this way. I've done this, and I can't escape from it anymore. Now I have to face it. And it takes quite a great deal of courage to
fight, and she still fights.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that demon doesn't go. The beast does not leave you because you decide. Right? Because you decide that you're going to wear your King Jesus shirt and your cross hat and listen to worship music, and you're going to do, whatever you're going to do in your life and become a better person. The beast doesn't go, oh, okay, never mind. He fights harder.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if somebody like that is going, okay, so I don't want to be next. I want to, I name my daughter after Jamie. I want to be a good person, whatever. And you can imagine the whispering in the ear and the screaming in the face, and even in your own thoughts. Your own thoughts have already convinced you that you're not worth recovery. You're not worth saving.
He's like the original prison podcaster. His channel is Lockdown 23-1. It's really interesting.
What's his name?
His real name is Josh. Josh something. He goes by Death, which sounds nasty, but it's actually his gamer tag on video games, so it's kind of a dork thing. But Josh got into a situation where a guy tried to beat him up at his own house. A group of guys, he stabbed one of them. Turns out in Virginia, it's not a stand your ground state, so he's charged with attempted murder. They drop it. He does 4 years in prison, which is already insane to me that he got in trouble for defending himself.
Yeah.
But he admits that he was going down a path that would lead him to have a knife where he would stab someone.
So maybe this is the best thing that could happen to him.
Yes. So then he gets out of prison for 4 years. 4 years is not nothing. That's a substantial
I'm thinking that 4 hours in prison would be too much for me.
Well, and then he gets out, and while he's in prison, the culture is everyone smokes weed. He gets out, gets caught smoking weed. They send him back to jail. He gets caught a second time. He ends up doing another 4.5 years for smoking weed. So he does 8.5 years for defending himself and smoking weed, which is now legal in the state as well, by the way. And he was of age. And he, instead of allowing those 2 massive setbacks to ruin his life, started working for his dad's company, started a YouTube channel on the side. He's got 900,000 followers and makes his living talking about that stuff. And he embraced a completely different life and world. But those are 2 huge setbacks that he could have been like everyone else and said, I guess I'm a criminal now.
Right. So
become one of those.
Isn't the point that it's never too late?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I think how I said it in there after Sandy's story was, it doesn't matter if you've lit the match 1,000 times on your life and torched your plans, torched your life, torched your path. It doesn't matter.
Well, and there's I don't know the exact verbiage of the expression, but something to the effect of, I don't judge people on their worst mistakes. But how do you get to the point where you don't judge yourself on your worst mistakes.
Oh my gosh, that is such a good point, Sean, that we see the courage in other people. We forgive other people.
Other people are deserving of grace. But when am I deserving of this grace? It's okay to say, I screwed up. Yeah, I made a mistake.
You should.
I cheated. I stole. I lied. I did whatever. These are bad things. But that doesn't mean I'm a cheater for eternity, a liar for eternity, a thief for eternity. It means I made a mistake. And now it's time to face that thing. It takes courage to say that, to just be, I got to make changes. And like I said, sit in that bomb as they
I love that.
say.
You know what it reminds me of? Think about this one. We're going to have to pause afterwards for people to really think about it. Every sinner has a future, and every saint has a past.
Yeah. What you think about, not for anyone who's not of the same faith as us on this is just an example, but it's like Jesus on the cross. He's got a thief and a murderer next to him.
Yeah.
And the thief has done something that really isn't hell worthy, but he's taunting Jesus and calling him names. If you're really anybody, get me off this cross, blah, blah, blah. He was not given eternal life. The murderer was like, all I want before I die is for you to forgive me for what I've done. And he goes, so it's just a matter of perspective and how you look at it, right? I mean, I think we'd all agree killing someone's a little worse than stealing from them.
Yes.
But what was in his heart and what he was in his heart was...
You know what? You bring up such a good point. The perspective on your situation, other people's, the world, is everything. So you can shift your perspective, right? Shift your attitude, and everything around you is still the same. Nothing's changed, but it seems like everything's changed.
Yeah.
But it's important to get perspective by looking at other people's lives and other situations, and things can always be worse. But it reminds me of, since you brought up basketball, and I'm not this basketball fan or anything, but remember I sent you that Shaquille O'Neal little clip the other day? So, this big star making bazillions of money, and he goes, so he's all bummed out because he has this really bad game, and he blamed it. It was a lot of pressure. It was too much pressure because he was going against someone that he looked up to and all this stuff, and it was just too much for him that day. So his dad goes, okay, so fly your butt back home and be at my house at whatever. His dad must have been in the military.
He was.
Like he was
Army.
He was be here at like 0500 or
he was a
whatever.
Army drill sergeant, I believe.
And he goes, my dad's the kind of guy that you don't speak to unless he speaks first.
He's half Shaq's size, and Shaq was terrified of him.
Yeah. So so they go to this under this bridge.
Actually, his stepfather who adopted him.
Oh, that's awesome.
Anyway.
So he goes into this bridge and he's looking at this tent for an hour and a half, and no one's going to speak because Dad hasn't said to speak yet. And he said, you think you have pressure? I'm so tired of these overpaid athletes acting like they have so much pressure. He goes, you know what pressure is? And out comes the dad, the mom, and two small children. You know what pressure is? Not knowing how you're going to feed your family.
Living in a tent.
That's pressure. Yeah. I don't want to hear another word about you having pressure. Anyway, what I like about that story has nothing to do with anything in my book. It has nothing to do with it's just such a great story, because what a way to be humbled, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't it true, though, the perspective? We think what we're going through is so bad, and it might be, you guys, it might be the worst thing you could ever imagine. I don't know about you, but what I've been through is one of the worst possible things I could imagine.
Yeah.
I'd rather have something horrible happen to me than what happened to Jamie. But it can always be worse, number one. And number two, you can always use it for good. There has to be some good that comes out of every bad situation. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Well, no matter how you look at it, we've talked about this before, but there's always somebody who's got way more going on than you.
Always.
So, like, you had Jamie get murdered. That's horrible. How about your friend Sarah Aglo, who we haven't seen in a million years? Her oldest son kills himself, and then her younger son gets run over by a car several years later, and she has no kids now, right? The burden on her is unbelievable. The one that I always think about.
Unbelievable.
I know one person who's been murdered. I know a bunch of fentanyl overdosed, but one person who's been murdered, and it was my sister. And I was talking with Joe J about it, and he was extremely compassionate. It was a friend of mine from the Bay Area, from not the nicest neighborhoods. And he didn't by any means one-up me. He was just like, man, I'm so sorry, all that. And then conversation carries on. And I think at that point in time, 8 and change years ago, he knew it was like 21 or 22 people who'd been killed and murdered. And then this last year in 2024, as hard of a life as we feel like it is to have lost Jamie, he got a divorce and was a pallbearer in 3 funerals, 2 of which were murders. One was a friend who died of aggressive cancer, childhood friend. And I mean, so at the bare minimum, if I'm missing anything in that 8-year gap, we're at 24 funerals he's been to, almost all of them murders.
Yeah.
And I only know one person. Now, granted, it's close to home. It's my sister.
Yeah.
But, I mean, can you imagine that?
No.
And he just walks through life, and he's smiling, he's happy,
yeah,
he's the most jovial dude in the world. I mean, most people would not be walking around this world.
Okay, but he's a good example of somebody who you can tell chooses to have a good attitude about life. And I think that
you can learn a lot from a person like him.
Okay, that reminds me of another story that April told me, and it's something that I'm really, I guess I'll say, proud of myself about, is that people hear my story and they're shocked. They're not just shocked because it's a shocking story. They're also shocked because they would have never guessed I would be going through that, because I'm always happy.
Other people and feeling.
Yeah, or they just meet me in like the nail salon and they'd be like, you're such a happy person and you're such a. So it reminds me of something that April said, is she said a lady said, they'd see each other at the dog park, I guess, all the time. And she said, I love your hair. It's so pretty. And April goes, oh, it's a wig courtesy of chemo. And she said the lady was shocked, not because, oh, that's a wig. I think she was shocked because she never saw cancer written on April's face.
Yeah. And how casually she was able to bring it up like it's not the biggest thing. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that. We both do that. Where when Jamie was murdered, I didn't really want to talk about it. And then I realized I have to, or I'll go nuts. Then it became, I have to talk about it as openly and as freely as I want. And now I'll just be telling someone, hey, little piece of intense news incoming. So my sister was murdered like 8 years ago. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, you're fine. I'm super cool talking about it. But because I chose to have that perspective of, I need to communicate this and make it, not that it's not a big deal, but it can't be every time you talk about having cancer or this. Yeah, so,
I know.
It's not a sustainable model to have this heavy heart every time you talk about.
I think it'll take you out if you do that. I mean, it'll take you out, maybe not physically, but you'll end up just a depressed, lonely, sad, awful person. And the other thing, too, is that this is something I wrote about in Still Standing After All the Tears, actually, was about how there's 2 types of victims: the poor me victim and the victim in disguise. So I was a victim in disguise. I was the kind that went around like everything was fine and I'm dying on the inside.
Secretly, you're like, oh, none of you people know what I'm
mad at everyone. Yeah. Oh, I'm resentful. But then the poor me victims are the ones, and neither one of them's good, by the way. But the poor me victims are the ones that are always just, telling everybody their sad tale. And so in the beginning,
I know a few of those.
Yeah, we all do. And in the beginning, people will empathize with you. They'll sympathize, I should say. They'll feel sorry for you. So what ends up happening, I believe, is eventually you end up with 2 kinds of people in your life. Either the ones that felt obligated to be in a relationship with you, or other poor me victims.
Yeah, people who want to be able to sit around and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one-way ticket to victim land.
One-upping each other.
You know what I call it? One downing. It's like, right? It's like one down. Oh, really? Well, listen to my story. And I'm not trying to discount people's stories or be insensitive to them.
No, anyone who's hearing this who thinks that we're being cavalier about, we're not talking about your child is currently doing heroin under a bridge somewhere and you're sad about it and we'll talk about it and that makes you some whiny little bee. Right. That's not what we're saying. What we're talking about is if you have that child in that situation and for 15 years, it's only poor me, my life is so horrible, and you don't do anything to try and improve it, at that point you are being whiny. You are not helping yourself. And it has nothing to do with me. I'm talking about you. If you're not going to do anything to improve your life, this is going to be you forever. You're just going to be...
Or worse.
That poor me, depressed, feeling like you have no purpose, you don't want to be here. And regardless of what anyone says, you can choose to say, I'm going to do my best to make the best. And that's just...
You have to. And you brought up a good point, because you're talking about one of the worst things that someone can go through, especially as, a mom, especially, I think it's harder on moms for some reason than dads, even most of the time. When your kid is going off the rails, or they're, like you said, if they're under a bridge or homeless, or that reminds me of Annelle. She's another person that we have in Burn Them Out. Um, she called it one time, and I had to use it. It's called that low hum of grief. So her point is, when you met Annelle, you've met her a couple of times, but you were just like, this is a joyous, funny person.
But that was a choice for her.
But living below that in her heart, though, is a low hum of grief over her son's addiction, homelessness, disappointment.
She's been through a lot, but she chooses to be positive regardless of how she feels about that.
Yeah. You know what's another thing I put in this book for the first...
I think about beating Jamie's killer to death once a day. But right. It doesn't... I don't allow that to
ruin
be my identity. And,
right.
And I don't bring it up to people. And
you don't live in anger.
I just have these nice little daydream fantasies while I'm driving down the road, and I just picture what I would do, and it makes me feel nice for a second, and then carry on about my business.
I just don't keep that anger with me.
No, it doesn't. I'm not angry when I'm thinking about it. It's joyous again.
So the first time that I'm writing about this that I can think of is that Rich's little brother died. And it's kind of interesting that you and Rich have a bond that I don't have with either one of you.
And Shawnee, and we all
have this lost sibling thing. I'm glad I'm not in your club.
Yeah.
But when the low hum of grief is a really kind of interesting perspective to me, because when I wrote about Rich's little brother dying, whose name is Brad, and my little brother's Brad, I can't even imagine losing my little brother. But so Rich's mom, you remember the first time you went to their house, or every time you went to their house, I talk about this in this book, because there was that black and white photo of Brad to the left of that fireplace. And I remember the first time going there and going, oh my God, he's frozen in time. He was 13 or 14, I can't even remember now. But and it's like he's frozen in time. And I thought, I couldn't even fathom it. Like you and Jamie were there, whatever. I couldn't even imagine that would be me. And
he died in like 1970, 69, 70 or something like that. Yeah, but so really long time. Yeah, but that was her son, and I just thought, I can't imagine it. But she's this joyous, happy person, right? So she was a character.
She was a character. So in the last month of her life, though, she's on all these medications. Remember all that, and we had to pare down all the medications and a spreadsheet and all this. So I had to make the spreadsheet about. They had pills for her to wake up, pills for her to go to sleep. I mean, it was just crazy.
Yeah.
And when to take them, and because we were her caregivers. And the one that Rich just zeroed in on.
Like Xanax or something?
He could not get over it. He could not, the antidepressant. He could not understand it. It didn't make sense to him. So he's with her at the doctor one time. They're sitting in the room together waiting for the doctor. And he goes, Mom, why do you need an antidepressant? One word answer. Bradley.
Yep.
And Rich said that was the first, it hit him like it had not hit him in more than 4 decades.
I was going to say, it's been like 45 years since he passed at that point or something like that.
But Rich had never understood what it must be like to lose a child until that moment with his mom. And then a year later, we would lose Jamie. And then he would really understand. But but isn't that interesting how that's a perfect example of somebody who chose... She could have gone into a depression and been like that for the next 45, however many years she lived after that, 55 years. And she chose not to.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
It hurts every day that I lost Jamie. Every single day it hurts. I carry a pain in my heart. But there you are, Sean. You stand at a crossroads. What do you do with it?
Yeah. It's like my cousins, David and Michael. I used this analogy with them. They both still live in a great deal of grief. So were living in a small town on a farm with their mom and their dad, part of a really like tight-knit group of Christian folks, homeschooled, so a really tight unit, and their mom was the epicenter of it. And I think David was 19.
And she was quite a personality.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Tina was the best. And I think Michael was like 14, and she had gotten cancer for the third time, basically couldn't eat, couldn't anything, faded away, died. So these guys have, 14 years old. The matriarch, their dad was so devastated he didn't know how to help them, so he went and spent a month with his family in California, and Michael just went and stayed at a friend's, and David went back to college, and they all just kind of, so they carried this with them. And the analogy that I used, we were talking about this last time I saw them, was I said, because David will always say to me, oh, well, what you've been through so much worse because your sister was murdered. And I said, I completely disagree. It's different. You lost the most important person in the world to you when you were a kid.
Of course.
I can't understand how you feel. I loved my Aunt Tina, but she wasn't my mom. She didn't raise me. I don't. So I said, here's how I look at it. We're all hiking at the top, to the top of a mountain in life. And eventually you get to the top, you enjoy the view, and then, you lay down and go to sleep. But along the way, you're carrying luggage with you, and you could choose to take some of those things that you don't need out of the luggage, and that's that grief stuff. I told him, I said to him, will you ever get to the top of that mountain with 80, 90 pounds in that bag? Never. But you could probably get there with 10, 15. So you need to start unloading some of that grief.
Why didn't we talk about, I could have put that in the book. Why didn't we talk about this before? I mean, you could have shared it.
You didn't ask.
I didn't ask if you had a really great perspective.
I had an analogy on, mountain climbing.
I even have a mountain section in here. What the heck?
Well, afterword. What do they call it? After?
Oh, the afterword. Yeah, I put it the next. That's it. You know what? Well, actually, we're filming this before it comes out.
Yeah.
So, but it's going to be, this is now you guys are watching or listening to it the day after the book came out. We're taking it off the shelf. That's it. We got to add that.
Yep.
It's, what's really cool about
I'll just write it on like a piece of paper and you just like staple it in the book.
Yeah, I'm sure Amazon would be happy to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about this, Sean, because I think that it's definitely the first book that is less of Jamie's story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, she's throughout the book because it's part of my story and what I'm carrying around here. But Still Standing After All the Tears is really an excellent book I've had many people say that the book was for moms of addicts, but they have nothing to do with addiction. Loved it, got a lot out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But let's face it, for the most part, people who are going to resonate with that book are mainly moms, some dads.
Dealing with a similar level of grief of some sort.
Yeah, an addiction and having more to do with that. And then the workbooks and stuff. But this is the first book that is really for anyone, as I say, who's walked through fire. I dedicated the book to anyone who's walked through fire. So I don't know how you live more than a couple decades on this planet without having something that blindsided you, right? Something that just came out of nowhere, something that just whacked you upside the head. Whether, like we said earlier, we're talking about some really devastating things or potentially devastating. But one of the very first things that I say in a quick succession of 3 examples was April's with her cancer, Shawnee, your cousin, who lost her first best friend, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
Tight the two of them were for, until Jamie went off on her road. And then another example I used, which I didn't continue out throughout the book, but I thought it was a great example of something that isn't maybe life-shattering, but it can be fairly momentarily life-altering. And it's when all of a sudden you got fired and you were leading your team in sales. So anyone can relate to big, huge things, but sometimes it's not what, that can be fixed over, a fairly short period of time. But in the moment, it's devastating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I went from making a substantial amount of money every month to $0 a month overnight and hadn't prepped for it at all.
Yeah, and it didn't make any more prepared because it didn't make sense.
Literally, number 1 in sales on my team and was let go for poor performance with some, political stuff that happened with a boss that didn't care for me. But that was a real blindside. That one shocked me.
Yeah, so I guess the whole point, and a lot of what we talk about in here and the stories that are so inspiring in this book have to do with what people do next. It's really about what you do next.
And whether you believe it or not, you do have a choice. It doesn't mean that you can't be sad, you can't be upset, that there's not always going to be grief to carry around, but take some of the weights out of that luggage.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Stop carrying that with you everywhere you go. Every single thing doesn't have to be heavy.
That is such a good point. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert, though. At the core of this book is courage. Because without it, I always say that anything worth having, doing, or being in life takes courage.
Yeah.
Even having faith. We have to have courage. So I also put one more person in this book that didn't have a devastating story attached to it, purposely, because I love the fact that we can also just flat out freaking choose courage, right? We can just do something that scares. So yesterday, Rich and I were going along. We were talking about skydiving again, I think, or something. I'm scared to death of heights.
Yeah,
and so
heights guy.
I was talking to Johnny, who I'm going to talk about in a second here. So Johnny's mom and I were talking about it. And she said that she went skydiving with him, but she was tandem with another guy, with an instructor. And I said to her, I'm so scared. I've always said I would never skydive, never, because I couldn't get myself out of the plane. And she goes, I go, they'd have to push me. She goes, well, that's pretty much what happens when you're tandem. Like they jump and you're on top of them.
Yeah, there's a man larger than you.
Yeah,
to your back,
and he's jumping.
Puts you out the door.
Yeah. So, but Rich was like, there's no way. I said, only reason I want to do it is because it terrifies me. So this brings me to the last person I haven't mentioned everyone in the book, by the way. These are just little snippets we thought about as we've been talking. But your friend Johnny, who I just adore, I put him in this book because I just thought, I know what it's like to face emotional danger. I know what it's like.
That's real physical, visceral fear. Right.
So I think some people like him couldn't imagine facing what I did, but I can't imagine facing that physical danger. It's just not, I don't get it. So he was the first person I ever actually interviewed when I was wanting to write a book that really centered on courage. There's really some great snippets in there about him. And one of the things I love is when he told me that he was afraid of heights. And I was like, okay, back up the train here. What did
As for the record, for anyone who's not aware, who's not heard me talk about this, Johnny is an airline pilot, a helicopter pilot in the Army, and airborne certified in the Army, and is afraid of heights.
Right. So when he goes to airborne school, he has to jump out of this airplane.
A bunch of times.
Yeah, but the first time, he tells me he's in the cockpit. He wasn't in the cockpit. He was in the plane with a bunch of, as he calls them, professional badasses like Rangers, Marines, big guys. And Johnny's a small guy.
Everyone in Special Forces has to go through that.
Right. And he's this small guy, and he goes, yeah, they're all talking tough and everything. And then the door opens and I could see the whites of their eyes. But so why would he volunteer for airborne school? Because he wanted to overcome that fear. He wanted to do that. Why did he become a commercial airline pilot after? I mean, why is he doing all these things? So initially, why did you join the military? Weren't you afraid you'd die? He said, yes, I was afraid I would die. But the fear of not doing something, what he said is that everyone should serve their country. That's his belief. And he said, the fear of not doing it scared me more than dying.
Yeah.
So I just
volunteered for 2 deployments too, including one to Bagram, Afghanistan.
Right. Okay.
While we're still at war.
Why does someone do? Okay. Obviously, there's a part of him that is so ingrained with that serving his country, and that's stronger than. But what I feel like is that that's the kind of courage that says the regret is scarier.
Well, it's true. It's true courage because he openly will tell you he was afraid. He did it anyway.
Is anybody not afraid?
Yeah, he did it anyway.
But isn't that what courage is?
Yeah, that's exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is like the and he always had this thing where he wanted to be a firefighter, dangerous, scary job. Wanted to be a cop, dangerous, scary job. Military, dangerous, scary job. He always just wanted to face something challenging like that. And it's not like anyone made him do it. He just felt called to challenge himself to do something that's difficult and dangerous in the service of others.
I love that. And that's why I think people should face fears. So life's going to give you plenty of fears to face without you having to run after them. But I also think we should try to face fears when we can.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think we should on purpose, which is why I, put the boa constrictor around my neck in Key West, because it scared me.
Yeah.
But I didn't see any lifeless bodies or blood on the street. I was like, okay, I probably won't die. And the guy was underneath me, right? The handler, so 50% chance I would die. So I decided to do it. Rod, Lynn, and Rich wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to do it because it scared me.
Mm-hmm.
But then, spoiler alert, Mona one-upped me on the boa constrictor story. So you'll have to read the book to find out just how she did that. But anyway, I think that's a good way to stop this episode today, just to say that everybody is courageous. And so many people think they're not. They look at other people and think that they're courageous people, like Johnny.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe people like me and you because of what we faced.
Which I don't see myself as courageous at all.
Okay, then that wasn't the last person. You brought up a great example. So Nikki, your wife, I added her to this book because the thing that kept sticking with me is after I had her on the podcast a couple months ago, or whenever it was, and I said, I think it's courageous for you to be a part of our story.
Yeah, I mean, we'd only been together for 11 months when Jamie was murdered.
Right, and before Jamie was murdered, you didn't start on your road to being who you are right now until after Jamie was murdered. You started working on overcoming the anger and learning how to overcome the grip of fear, of grief, all the stuff that you worked on while you're with her.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't come into this, kind of like polished up person. Nikki stepped into your story when you were not in a good place.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she said to me, I don't feel like I'm courageous, I kept thinking about that. I'm thinking that belongs in a book about courage. Because I think too many people don't, like you said earlier, they don't see their own acts of bravery as that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But bravery is not always jumping out of an airplane or facing someone's killer in court. Sometimes it's just showing up.
Many, many different shapes and sizes for sure.
Yeah, and everyone has courage in them. So the point of this whole book, Burn the Map, turn setbacks into strength and fear into fuel, is that, again, everyone is courageous. It's all a call. It's really a call to courage.
Yeah.
And to allow life to unfold, to burn a map if it's not serving you. If the path that you're on is not working, it's okay to light fire to your path and head down a different one.
Well, I have a quick funny thing before we wrap up. You use the expression that things turn around 180 degrees earlier. And since we've mentioned basketball repeatedly, if Robbie watches this, he'll appreciate this.
Is this whole episode just for Robbie?
There's a famous clip. Jason Kidd, who's like a Hall of Fame basketball player, and he was a head coach, and they bring him in to coach his first team. And he said, they ask him, what's your game plan? And he said, I just want to come in here and turn this team around 360 degrees. And everyone was like,
you're right back where you started.
You just want to go right back to where you he ended up getting fired, by the way. But I just thought I've been thinking about that the whole.
No, embarrassing, the poor guy.
So yeah, poor guy. I think he meant 180. You might want to stick with a half turn.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good way to end it too. If the path you're on, whether it's physically, emotionally, your work, your whatever life path, just your attitude, you can turn it around 180 degrees. And I think that you'll be really inspired by the stories in the book and some of the just wisdom and tips and inspiration. Because I'm a firm believer, Sean. I've only lived for 63 years so far. In my 63 years, I don't think we've ever been in a time where courage is more necessary than it is now.
Yeah.
I think we're living in the scariest times because we have access to information the way we do and so much in our face.
Yeah, inundated with constant bad news and things. Yeah.
Yeah. So choose courage and get a copy of Burn the Map. And I would love to hear from you when you read this book. I'd love to know just exactly how it has inspired you.
And comment in the comment section how my portion was the best.
Actually, you know what? You really should be commenting on these videos.
Yeah.
I mean, we would love to talk to these people.
Helps get the message out there, and we will reply to everything too.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to have communication with people that watch these videos. And some of you I know are listening in podcast apps. But anyway, have a great day, and we'll see you next week.